everybody. Welcome back to the Quest for the Bestest. It's the podcast from Backlog Banter, where we are looking at every single Best Picture winner, and we are also ranking them in our own sort of pseudo-random order because the last couple weeks, as you know, we've been hanging out in together. We're back in our normal recording environment now, but today we are on the second part of our longest shortest Best Picture winners. It's time for Marty. Because last time we did Gone with the Wind, which is the longest Best Picture winner, and now we're doing Marty, which is the shortest at a breezy hour and 30 minutes, just about a straight 90-minute, lovely short film. So I'm really looking forward to talking about this one because it's a bit of a, I don't know, it's a bit of a doozy. I didn't know what I was going into when I started watching it earlier today. But before that, let's do our little housekeeping. Last week, of course, Gone with the Wind, but where did it end up? I'll tell you. It got an average score of 7.0, and therefore it goes at number 52 on our list, just below Dances with Wolves and above An American in Paris. So, surprise! I mean, we'll have to see when we check in with the commenters, but no one's super outraged just yet about our placement.
It'll come.
Okay, Abram, it'll come.
Yeah.
We're due for it.
Yeah, we got some good comments this week. I know we're gonna have our mea culpa moment after it at the main comment of the day, but I also want to just shout out Seth as usual. Seth, you got to step it up. He just says Marty gang. We got Abby. Shout out to Abby, loyal Quest viewer Abby. But the two main comments I want to talk about here. First off, JP Sarahill. I'm not familiar with this gentleman. That's actually also not his name. JP Harahill. I can't read. Sorry, JP. I'm not sure if you've ever commented before, so I just want to shout you out. Not a very deep comment, but it says George Lucas subconsciously or not seemed to base Han Solo and Rhett Butler. I'm a man who enjoys Star Wars, so I wanted to shout you out. But the main comment, of course, comes from one of our treasured sons. This comes from Dan's, who writes the following. There is a huge difference in watching a movie at home on a TV or monitor versus seeing it at the theater. I saw this first at an old theater with bad projection and kind of liked it. It was too long. Then I saw it on TV and it was just okay, but too long. Then we tried watching it on TV again and couldn't get through the whole thing. Then, a few years ago, we saw it on the big screen and it was very good. When you're interrupted by distractions, the whole movie watching experience changes a lot. That said, I think you guys are on target with this one. It has never been one of my favorites for every reason you discussed. I'd be closer to Abrams' vote on this one, as you should be. Still, it is awesome to look at and incredible on the big screen. Now, that's a very interesting conversation to have at a different juncture, what we kind of think about the theater screen and the little screen. But thank you, Dan, as usual. Insightful, a little bit of non sequitur, but I'll allow it. There wasn't much competition this week.
You'll allow it. All right. Thank you for that featured comment, Abram. And now we've got one additional order on the to-do list before we can get into our dessert of talking about this movie. We got to get through our greens before we can eat our ice cream. Tanner, get on your hands and knees and beg forgiveness for your great sins that you've committed.
Well,
our mea culpa moment.
You say my great sins, and let me illuminate before I get into the nuts and bolts here a second. So, over the last 2 Quest episodes, we have been litigating this issue in the comment with our other treasured son of Quest, John Tor 11. And right. John Tor has pointed out 2 episodes ago, on whichever one that was, Gladiator, I believe, that there seems to be an incongruity in the quest list.
No, Driving Miss Daisy.
In Driving Miss Daisy, that there seemed to be an incongruity with the quest list. And after doing some keen-eyed investigation, I concluded that he was correct. As, of course, if you harken back to the great re-rank episode, you will remember that in a 4-way tie at 8.3, we placed just in the 4 here. We placed Argo, The Best Years of Our Lives, All About Eve, and Midnight Cowboy at the top of that of those 4. But doing some keen-eyed investigation, I noticed that something was amiss because one of those films was no longer an 8.3 in our handy-dandy spreadsheet that we use. One of them, it seems, was at an 8.5. So thanks to the fine folks over at Google, they include a little feature on Google Spreadsheets where you can look at previous versions. So I dug through months, days, weeks, and months of
Tanner out here with his magnifying glass,
of Quest spreadsheet updating, and I found that on February 24th at 7:47 p.m. Timo Nelson added his score for the best years of our lives without notifying any of us, which then shot that film up from an 8.3 to an 8.5, explaining the incongruity, and thus we issue.
It's actually
I
Timo's
ask.
fault.
It's actually Timo's fault. Timo, I ask that you issue an apology to John Tor 11.
And to the entire Quest audience and your co-hosts, because
I'm
you have
sorry.
lied to us. We have been putting out false information, and this is terrible.
Yes, I have rectified both the spreadsheet and the letterbox list, so it should be clean for the audience to go look at the letterbox list, of course.
Well, thank you for erasing my errors, Tanner. I'm truly sorry, Quest audience. I just hadn't seen the movie the first time we reviewed it, and then I watched it shortly before that date, and I thought, well, I should give it a score.
Yeah.
And then I forgot to tell you.
Well, we'll let it slide this once.
I suppose. But without further ado.
Okay, that's enough messing around. Let's get into the business of love, and talk about Marty. Who wants to go first with your initial impressions on the film that we all just watched?
Today. Let's get Tucker in.
Let's
get Tucker in there.
Oh, no. All right. You know what? I'll talk about Marty first. Today, we're talking about Marty. This is the shortest Best Picture winner. I just want to make sure you guys are all clear on that. But that, I would say, is maybe the most notable thing about this film. In terms of when I'm looking at the lineup of Best Picture winners, you don't hear Marty brought up very often. And I would say that's both for good and not so good reasons. Not that this movie isn't good, but like, there's not really great reasons to talk about this movie in the history of Best Pictures, because, well, I think it's a very good movie. It feels very out of place in the Best Picture lineup. A snappy 90-minute sort of maybe 50s rom-com in a way, and I enjoyed this movie a lot more than I expected to, but I'm not really sure how much I have to say about it, because it hits its own notes and it develops a handful of characters. But that's really all that it has to offer. It's lacking in theme and scope and usually the things we're usually talking about here on Quest for the Bestest. But what it makes up for instead of that is heart from our main pair of characters who I very much enjoyed. But I'm very interested to hear what we all talk, because we never go a full Quest episode just going like, we always hit on some interesting nugget here.
Mm.
Yes, that's right. I want to go next. I just want to mention that our stars are Ernest Borgnine and Betsy Blair. That's their names. That's what I want to mention. I liked Marty. I found it to be quite a heartfelt and nice little story. I find that I was pulled into it very quickly. I could get what's going on. I found the characters clear and easy to understand, and like know who wants what and what's going on, and that I found it to be a film that elicited quite a sympathetic response for me. I really felt for this guy, and I'm like, dang, he really is he's just a lonely butcher.
Aren't we all lonely
he's
butcher?
He's kind of heavy set, In our own way, we are a lonely butcher. So I had a good time watching it. I've got some more intellectual things to throw into the mix a little later. I'm just keeping my cards close to my chest.
That's what we always do on Quest. Never share our thoughts until the right moment.
Yes. Until the right moment. That's exactly true. I enjoyed it. I liked Marty.
I'll go next because I would like to hear from Abram's unique viewing experience that he telegraphed to us a little bit in our private DMs. But I'd like to save him for last. I really enjoyed Marty. I quite enjoyed it. Tucker, you say that it doesn't. It's not that notable. Except for the fact that maybe it's the shortest. I would say that the other things you rattled off there do make it notable. It is a maybe quite akin to the most recent Best Picture winner. It is a quiet, quite self-contained drama with comedic elements, but it is like a rom-dram, if you will, more than a rom-com, maybe. But yeah, I think that the small scale of it, the very self-contained narrative in a decade of the 1950s, where things that won were giant, massive scale, epics like Bridge on the River Kwai and Ben-Hur, or big colorful sort of musicals like Gigi or An American in Paris.
Yeah.
This and like the previous winner on the waterfront are really outliers in the sense that they are quite quiet and quite reserved sort of dramas that I think are really interesting to examine in a year where everything else seemed quite set in two sort of distinct camps. So yes, I would like to sort of maybe delve into why the Academy might have gone for such a quiet and reserved sort of film.
Well, I guess that makes it my turn.
Yeah, that is.
I'm gonna read out a transcription here.
Oh,
This
all
is-
right.
this
BLB
is from our-
stenographer, Abram Biener, read the transcript.
This is from our private 4-man WhatsApp group that we commune in. 1:50 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I write, God, this movie is fucking miserable. And then I remembered seeing, I think it was Tanner typing, never sent a message. There's no message sent until 1:52, 2 minutes later, which I write, 1950s incel core.
Yeah.
Still no reply. At 2:15 p.m., I write, never mind, good movie. And then to which Tanner replies, lol. Now here's the thing. This Marty to me feels like this is just completely baseless, but this is how I feel. To me, Marty feels like a good movie for people who know who Robert Linklater is. Like if you like, here's I don't know anything about Robert.
Do you mean
I
Richard
don't.
Apparently
Linklater?
Yeah, probably.
You mean
Okay. The movie director?
you know him so little you don't know his
communicating
first
why
name.
this movie's not for me, right? Because if you know who this guy is, and you're like, oh, well, he made Boyhood, right? It's the same kid over 12 years. That's kind of neat, right? I like slice of life, whatever. You probably found something to enjoy in Marty, and I didn't until 2:15, in which we had a really nice scene between our two leads when we learned a little bit more about Marty's time in the war. And I said, never mind, good movie, because I was like, we're getting at it here. And then it's like you went over a little hump, and I'm like, oh, I enjoy the movie now, and whoop, right back down, because I like the movie for literally the span of that sequence.
No.
This is just kind of like, it's a little slice of life. He's kind of sad and awkward, and you get to see him fall in love with a girl who's also kind of awkward and sad, and you see him fall in love, and then there's like, I don't know, the mom's Italian mom. She's got her family values, and it's a movie about values, right? And just watching how people kind of coexist, and you kind of feels like you're peeking through a keyhole, watching something you're not really supposed to see. And maybe that's interesting, but to me, I just found it incredibly boring. I think Marty's a good movie. I don't really like. Where am I going to poke the holes in it? I'm not really sure. I think the script is quite nice, but I don't really care. Ultimately, that's where I come down on it. I mean, Tanner, you read out these films of the 50s, being like, it makes it so interesting that this film wins juxtaposed against others, and I say, yeah, it's probably interesting, but goddamn, my enjoyment was held way better by every other movie you listed there, because I feel like if you had boiled Marty down to a 15-minute screenplay that I read in my creative writing class, I would have found it a lot more profound than when we're taking this idea and putting it over 90 minutes. Because to me, that 90 minutes doesn't feel especially short. When we're sitting in the bar for literally like 3 minutes of screen time, so what do you want to do today, Angie? I don't know. What do you want to do, Marty? I don't know, Angie. What do you want to do today, Marty? I don't know, Angie. I just can't get into it. I found it very hard to get into this film, and it lost me for 85% of the movie, I'd say.
Sure. I think that for me, the reason why I can certainly understand that, and I felt that myself for maybe the first half of this film, is because I frankly don't think it really gets interesting, or we learn too much about the characters, and their personalities don't become super engaging for me until we're introduced to the dynamic between Marty and Claire. And I think that's where the movie's heart really is, in watching their dynamics form. I would say over time, but not really, because this film takes place in a really condensed period of time. But over the time that we are allowed to see them, allowed, quote unquote, by the runtime of the film, I think that that's where I really begin to care. I'm like, oh, this is what all this was leading up to. But because for the first almost half of the film, maybe third of the film, it does feel like we're just going from scene to scene, establishing that people like Marty, but he's kind of just a guy, and boy, he sure does need to get married. And they hammer that point home so much that and it's funny in some circumstances, but the movie does end up feeling a little bit repetitive. And I think that you're right. Like, even with this 90-minute runtime, it for me, it didn't feel long, but there were even scenes in there that I was like, yeah, this could have been trimmed. And that's surprising, considering how short the film already is and how sparse it is in terms of characters and themes and stuff like that. But I would have wanted a longer movie with a more compelling conflict and less repetition in the dialogue and the scenes, to really flesh this out and to be something super special. As it stands, I think it's a good movie, but I think it does not, in my eyes, really deserve the high acclaim, because it feels like something not only that I've seen already, but doesn't really push itself to its fullest potential.
See, my take on the beginning of the film is that it is the space that we are setting up what Marty's like what his normal kind of everyday existence is like. And to me, those repetitious elements show to us just like how like boring and mundane and just kind of like distasteful Marty's like everyday life is. And those moments when he's sitting with his friend in the bar and they just go back and forth for a long time, just like, well, what do you want to do today? And later in the film, it's revealed that, well, his friend also doesn't have a girlfriend or a wife or anything.
I think
so
that was
he's
heavily
just,
implied.
they're both these just like sad kind of, well, yeah, but like they're both these sad kind of lonely, sad, lonely guys just like without anything to do and essentially showing like the lovelessness of Marty's life before the film. And even you talk about the scene, the bit where it's everyone is remarking how he needs to get married. To me, that was like so close to the beginning of the film, and it was just like boom, 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 boom. There was like a scene where like 3 people told him that he should get married, and they used the same lines over and over again. I think, which is obviously intentional. You don't just write 3 characters saying the same thing over and over again. And so that just sets up the film immediately. And he's like, well, he feels the pressure to find love. And then we can go on to see how he A, doesn't want to do that, or B, does eventually find a space to find love in someone. So I think the beginning sets it up nicely for me for the later elements of the film, which I also find nice, and I don't know, they're fun to watch because I am a Richard Linklater enjoyer. That's true. I like Linklater movies, and this movie I think is an interesting comparison.
I mean, I
his
think
work.
that Timo, you're right. To me, the beginning of the film is establishing the rut that Marty is living in. He has heard from probably every person in his life for the past 15 years of his life that he needs to get married, and not for lack of trying. As we come to understand about him, he's gone on dates and he's just sort of gotten beaten down and worn down over the years of his life, being like, I don't know, whatever it is that like the ladies out there are looking for, I don't really have it. And you're right. I mean, this is probably the point at which Abrams sent his 1950s incel core message, because it does ring a
Probably.
little bit of that, and I was a little trepidatious at that point in the film as well. I was like, okay, where are we going here? We don't explore that point fully, but I guess he is, he's not a very ambitious guy. He's not a very confident guy. So I guess we can understand from those aspects of his personality that he's not going to have much luck in social, sort of social circles and dances and stuff like that. He seems very out of place in that dance that they go to.
He's just like us for real.
Yeah, exactly. But he's also. I think this is really interesting casting for Ernest Borgnine. He's not Hollywood handsome, so I think that it's good casting for a character like this. He's not a Cary Grant or a Jimmy Stewart or anything like that. He's shorter, he's stockier. He actually was like 34, 35 at the time of this filming. Ernest Borgnine got a very late start in Hollywood, as I understand it. He's only like 5 years into his career at this point. So I think that the establishing moments of Marty's character do a solid job of setting us up as this guy who's been, like I said, beaten down, worn down, not having much luck socially. He's basically stuck with these sort of shithead friends who are like, hey, let's go to a burlesque show. Hey, we're gonna get laid tonight. Oh boy, oh yeah. And he's just like, I'm not really into this, but like these are my friends, I guess. And yeah, I think it's really interesting the way that they set up his character at the beginning.
Yeah, he's got, and the film even tells us he's got that dog in him, but derogatory.
Mm-hmm.
We learn that that's not a good thing. He's a dog. No one likes him. He doesn't have any luck with the ladies, right? And I do like that. While I do find the beginning of the film monotonous, I think that there is nonetheless a really nice romantic core of the film, as I think we're saying, calling it heartwarming or sort of whatever platitudes we're issuing the film, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that the moment where he finally gets out of that rut, as you're saying, is established early on, Timo, is really lovely. I really like I really love that extended sequence of him just fucking babbling.
Yeah.
Just babbling, can't think he's even remarkably, I can't stop talking. I think that's really great. And then the ways that it sort of segues into, what is his girlfriend's name?
Clara.
Yeah. Clara. When Clara goes to see her parents in the bedroom and then she can't stop talking, the dad's like, huh?
I don't
I think
understand
that's a
what just
really-
happened, but she said she
Yeah.
was taking that job, so that's good.
I don't know
Yeah,
how
that's
their
a-
parents don't understand what she's saying. I feel it's
Yeah, it's not
relatively
very-
clear. They're just
They're
kind of a
old.
bag of rocks
They're
over
old
there.
or whatever.
It's tired. It's middle of the night,
Yeah.
right? So, but I
Mhm.
like that stuff, and I, as much as the beginning does great on me, I think you guys make a really good point about sort of situating the narrative. But I got a question for you, right?
Okay. I'm all ears.
What's the sort of like larger social message, social situation in the film? Because for me, and I think part of the reason why I come away so disinterested from Marty is that for being 90 minutes, the film feels really unfocused to me. Like the amount of time we actually spend with Marty and Clara is not that much, right? We got to learn about the aunt, and we got to learn about the grandma, and we got to talk about them, and then we got to talk about the unhappy couple with the new baby, and then that whole all the
Mhm.
family dynamics, the friend dynamics. It feels like there's just all of this stuff stuck to this romance between Marty and Clara, and I really do think that if the film it's not a complicated film, but I think actually if it was even a little bit simpler, if it really was just like,
Yeah.
hey, Marty, Clara, they fell in love, and this is our through line to explore these social issues, right? Maybe that focus would have let me into the narrative a little bit more, because otherwise it's like, I don't care about any of these familial tensions. I don't feel like we're getting enough time to really explore them. I just find myself getting bogged down in a lot of the material that to me feels like it's like a disproportionate amount of the runtime.
Yeah, I would agree. Those are probably my least favorite parts of the film as well. They do. I wouldn't use language like bog down the film, but I do feel that they do draw attention away from Marty and Claire a little bit. And Abram, if you really find issue with those, I might recommend that you go to the 1953 TV play that Marty is adapted from, of the same name, of course, written by the same guy. A number of actors make returning roles that Ernest Borgnine does not. But a number of the actors, like his mother, his aunt, and Angie, are all actors from the TV play. And I think that's really interesting. That because I looked at the runtime, the TV play is 50 minutes. So I think that
sure.
that probably contains a much tighter narrative. Obviously, being cut down by 40 minutes here. But yeah, I would obviously none of us have seen it. If by chance someone out in the audience has seen it, let us know if
If
this
that's
is the
even
case or not.
possible.
If it's even possible, if you saw this on TV back in 1953. But I would be interested to know if if the stuff with between his mother and his aunt and his cousins who have a baby and are trying to like offload his aunt into their house, if that stuff was in there or not, because it does feel tertiary.
Yeah, it's interesting that it feels tertiary, but it also feels like it's in this weird place where I was talking about how I wish the movie had something grander that it was going for, so a more unique spark that was sort of guiding the entire thing. And I feel like they tried to have that by balancing this family dynamic and introducing, okay, what is the cultural differences between generations and how is that impacting his mother versus and his mother's relationship with him and her relationship with her sister and her sister's relationship with her children and then the babies. Like there is this concept. It doesn't feel like it's fully like tied
Yeah.
up or explored, but if they do introduce it, I think that as I was saying, this walks a weird middle ground to where it does feel tertiary, but I recognize its importance because it means that they're trying like to explore something else. But I do
Mhm.
wish that it fell on either side of the coin. I wish that it was either we were exploring the entire culture of Italian American families in this time period. And okay, that's what the film is about. Maybe like Moonstruck or something like that. Or it leans all the way to just focusing on the relationship. And Abram, thank you for mentoring Richard
You're
Linklater
welcome.
because the Before trilogy that I think
Mhm.
is the gold standard of focusing a film solely on a relationship between two characters and being incredibly compelling. Before Sunrise and Before Midnight are two of my favorite movies of all time. Before Sunset is the worst, but yeah, I also like that one. And and I think that I was maybe wanting that or something a little bit grander, which the films from this time usually seem to tackle. But this one is a middle ground that I think maybe works for itself, but it doesn't necessarily feel distinct on either side because of that.
So I got meaning from those elements, especially with the mothers, the mother, and then the mother-in-law, the sister of Marty's mother. And to me, that whole element was developing this like I guess I'll call it a thematic notion, because maybe it isn't
Sure.
like finished. I don't think they have like a conclusion to this question, basically, of what happens to mothers when their sons are in a relationship, and don't, the previous woman
Yeah.
in their life is replaced with this other woman. And so that idea, and to see how that was folding out with one mother, and then to have Marty and his mom being in this moment. And there are a couple moments where Marty's mom does, I feel like, really show some humanity, and I think is a great moment in the film, in which she kind of realizes, after Marty brings Clara over,
It's
that, like,
starting to
this is
her,
going
and
to
you see
happen
those
to her.
reactions on her face, and I think those are absolutely some of the most interesting thematic moments of the film. Is when we're
Huh.
learning that she's sort of coming to realize that her life is being changed forever, because we don't see where the film goes after this, but you presume that Marty and Claire get married, he moves out, they're introducing these elements of, let's sell the old house, move downtown. It's sort of like progression of loss, sort of light loss in someone's life, and I do think those are interesting and great moments for her character, but they don't ultimately lead anywhere, which is why I think that they end up feeling sort of superfluous, even if they are interesting on concept.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It reminds me. Let me take you to the Mars Science Center. Here I am sitting in the back row of my astronomy class, right?
In
And
Mars? That's far
it's in the
away.
building,
How'd
right?
you get
That's
there?
it's a commute from my dorm room, but I would never really answer any questions because, frankly, I was on the Halo Reddit or something for the entirety of the period. But what I would do is I would raise my hand and ask questions, because you don't have to have anything to say to ask a question, right?
Sure.
You don't even have to get an answer, frankly. You just you get your participation point for the day, and you go back to WordPress or whatever the hell you're doing instead of paying attention in class. And Timo, I feel like sometimes, you're right. It feels like the film is doing what I did. It's like, and what if we explore this? What's the deal with parents and their children? And then going back to the Halo subreddit.
There's no
The Halo
punchline for
exists-
that. You got this. You got the what's the deal with parents and
Yeah.
their children, and then there's no punchline.
Right, and I think, to me, that kind of comes back to my idea of the lack of focus, right? Because it does feel like there should be another act to the film where
Yeah.
we see, okay, so now we've got Marty, we've got Clara, they're together. What happens, right? Because there's a very on the nose sequence, which, obviously it's a comedic beat, but to me, I didn't find the film very funny, frankly. But but it's the mom and the aunt talking, and one day your son's gonna come back and say we got to move out of the house. We got to
Hey,
move
this
to
house
place
is falling
downtown.
apart. We got to move
Right.
out. Yeah.
And they do, and then literally Marty comes in and does the exact bit right?
Immediately. Oh, hey, this house is kind of falling apart. You know what we should do? We should sell this house. And they're like, gulp.
Yeah, and it's a fine moment, but what it communicated to me was like, okay, this is where we're going. But instead, the film ends with, like, Marty's talking to his friends, like, hey, let's go bang some broads and let's look at these porn pictures. And Marty's like, no, I can't do any of that. I gotta go call Clara. I gotta follow this straight and narrow, right? And then the movie ends.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm left holding the bag. I'm like, well, okay, what am I missing here, right? I do think this idea of the thematic notion is not only very funny, but I think it's very apt in this case. Because I really do feel like, far be it from me to argue for a quest film to be longer, especially after Gone with the Wind, but I really do think that this film never reaches its natural conclusion on a character level, a plot level, a story level, really, and that just felt unsatisfying.
I guess what I would say is that I maybe view the relationship in this as a avenue for both Marty and Clara to become more confident, to become ambitious, to sort of move out of these ruts that they're both
Sure.
in. We see Marty's rut obviously fully explored. Exactly.
The
They,
jobs.
they're getting new jobs and stuff like that. Marty is like toying around with this idea of buying the butcher shop, and only really like talks about it with like in any serious manner after he meets Clara, and he's like, I have to like move my life ahead. Finally, I've like found a person that I really care for. That's a next step in a life path, and I'd like to take it further than that, obviously. And I think that his character arc really comes to fruition. I was talking earlier about his lack of ambition, his lack of confidence, and really just like submitting himself to his sort of Weasley ratty friends who want to go look at porn pictures and stuff like that.
Just like
He
us for
stands
real.
up to them. Yeah. He stands up to them. I call it that, Tucker. And he's like,
It was meant for you to
you
catch.
guys are insulting like this woman that I really care for, and I'm not gonna fucking put up with it anymore. Because for the past that was the case for probably the last 15 minutes of the film, was he was getting like these demeaning comments about Clara from his mother, where she's like, yeah, from everyone. So from his mother, his mother being like, oh, she's not very pretty, she's not Italian, oh, these college girls, they're one step from the street in some regards.
Well,
And his friends being like, oh, Marty,
Yeah,
you were with a real dog
Perhaps-
last night, weren't you, Marty? And he just kind of puts up with it,
Mhm.
just like he has sort of put up with things his entire adult life, until he finally snaps and says, you guys, I care for this woman, I had a good time last night, I don't care what you people think, I'm going to call her, I don't want to do any of this stuff with you, I'm going to call Clara. I think that's the sort of conclusion that Marty's arc comes to, is that he's grabbing his own life by the reins and sort of paving his own path, as he hasn't for the last probably 15 or his entire life, maybe.
Yeah, I think that comes with maybe the biggest pro and the biggest con for me with this movie. And I'm gonna start with the pro, because I think that this is maybe the thing that I'm most interested in with this film. Is I think this film is at its best when we are learning about 1950s dating culture, the culture between all these men and the women in their lives, all across town. It does feel like a very tight knit community. Everyone knows Marty when he walks into the bar. They're always, they're saying hi across the street, and we're learning about the conflict between the sexes in the 1950s. And all the men are, holy crap, are they misogynistic in every possible fucking regard. and that's like off-putting to people of our day and age, but it is an interesting look into what culture was back then, and how men are approaching dating these women, and still some men do to this day. But I that's what I found most compelling, is when I'm seeing through the lens of these side characters who are not treating these women they're dating nicely, and Marty's sort of looking on from the side as they're doing the dance, or trying to get Clara to do what they want, and looking at it through the lens of Marty, who I think is a very sympathetic character, definitely makes this a very compelling, tight knit world for us to look in on as an example of what culture was like in the 1950s.
I think that adds to the kind of the not really like I feel like the film's like stated message is like, hey, even ugly people can find love.
Yes.
Which is not really certainly not a very deep message, but I think that factors into the stereotypes about 1950s dating culture. And at least for me, having seeing if you watch Hollywood romance movies or rom-coms or whatever, like everyone in them is freaking beautiful. And even in movies where the characters are supposed to be ugly, and then they maybe get a transformation or whatever, and then suddenly they're beautiful by the end of the film. This film allows its characters to be human and normal, and just like they're much more. I feel like our love and our romance here is natural feeling, and like they are people, and they find each other, and it's like their personalities that they want to be around. And so the stuff that the film says about how 1950s dating works, I think, is maybe counterpointed with how this romance works, because it does feel very nice to watch it.
I mean,
blossom.
Timo, I would push back on the notion that, I know you're joking anyway, but like the notion that the message of the film is ugly people can find love too. But I think if we want to find a message that can be carried out of 1955 and into 2022, that is that isn't just a retrospective look back on 1950s dating culture, is even if like the people around you or society or everyone, like basically, even if you are being told from all angles that like you're out of the game, there's no one in the world for you, like you're just gonna have to relinquish yourself to the fact that you're gonna be alone for the rest of your life. That's not the case. There is someone for everyone. And I think that is a cliched notion, no doubt, but I think it's an important notion for people to keep in mind, to not get sort of dragged down into despair in many ways, and
into 1950s
especially
incel culture.
into 1950s incel culture or 2020s incel culture, which is
Even worse.
exponentially more harmful, I would say. Speaking of, though, I did kind of find it interesting in the final scene with his friends when they're like hanging out in his house. Like there were some interesting parallels to the shitty dude behavior today, where like they were talking about like a book or something they were reading, where it's like, man, this guy's so cool. All these women want to have sex with him, and he doesn't have sex with them. Man, he's so cool. I want to be just like him. This guy sure can write a book or whatever. I was like, yeah, that's just
Yeah,
kind of
this
like
guy sure can
Sigma
write.
male grind set sort of stuff, but in the 1950s, like,
Mhm.
no, he's so cool because he's not having sex with women, and it's cool because they all want him, and I want to be just like this guy, and yeah, stuff like that, or like the
And then Marty over here is like, guys, put the porn away. My mom's
Exactly.
outside.
But I just find
Just
I
like
just find
today.
this stuff, yeah, quite interesting. Quite interesting. Yeah.
Some
Yeah,
things never change.
I mean, I think you guys are right, but to me, it also just feels very thin. Because sometimes when I work, something on in the background, right? And my most recent vice is people like watching videos of people like Hassan Piker react and make fun of Andrew Tate videos.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, that communicates the same message as this movie. Now, that's not to say that just because a message exists elsewhere means that it can't be told in a different way, in a different format, whatever. I'm obviously being a fool. But my point being, there is so many digestible ways to get the message that, toxic masculinity is a perennial issue that we need to address in our society. And there is reason to, divorce yourself from these constructed and dangerous ideas of masculinity and live a healthier life, make genuine connections, be a good man, right? And I think that is what the film is trying to communicate. But I don't need Marty to tell me that. And what I come down to is like, okay, this is a familiar message.
Yeah.
What new am I really gleaning from this, right? And the slice, again, I think the slice of life is interesting. But what might add insult to injury for me is I don't think that filmically Marty is very interesting. I can't think of really moments of cinematography that really struck me, right? I mean, I think the lighting's fairly nice. I think shots look good. But I feel like it's base level thematics about being a good man being built upon by what just feels like perfunctory dramatic filmmaking. And that's okay. But in the context of Quest for the Bestest, I find it really hard, as Tucker was saying earlier, to really extract more than these basic ideas out of Marty.
Yeah. And I think that is exactly how I wanted you throw the baton to me. I'll catch it. I keep on running because this is the con that I was talking about earlier with the fact that the film does ultimately feel kind of thin in its lack of stakes or external pressure other than his friends who have been treating him bad. Like there is a lack of that spark that I was talking about earlier. Something else to make this film stand out from the crowd of other movies that have talked about this theme. And frankly, some of which I think have done it a lot better. And this is I just have to make this comparison because sitting in the back of my head, I'm thinking about this movie. I'm like, so Clara is a teacher, right? And the conflict that is between her and Marty, other than the fact that their relationship is going well and they've got the social pressure of a conflict between the sexes in the 50s, is that she is going to move somewhere north to a better school to get a better job and live on her own. And I swear on my life, you can watch this movie, and I'm not making this up. That is the exact same plot as The Nutty Professor 2: The Clumps, which I just watched last night, in which Sherman Clump is trying to date this other professor who is going to go work at another college, but he's just like, hey, it's okay, we can still make it work. It's the exact same plot, but, and I know this is crazy, I think this is a better movie than Nutty Professor 2: The Clumps. But I think that movie does something a little more interesting with its structure because it has this externalization of toxic masculinity through Sherman Clump's persona, Buddy Love. Yeah, yes. Yeah. And I know that's ridiculous. I know the movies are incomparable in many ways, but on a basic structure level in terms of conflict and externalizing conflict and introducing other plot elements that are frankly tied up a little bit better, I do think that that the Nutty Professor 2 has something a little bit over Marty, the Best Picture winner. But I'm just saying that, like Abram mentioning that we've seen this message before. Go watch the Nutty Professor 2. It's the exact same story, and it has a little more stakes. And I just wish that this film had its own buddy love that it certainly seems to be lacking.
No, Tucker, I have a quick question for you. This is a quick aside.
Yeah.
What year did the Nutty Professor 2: The Clumps come out?
2000, something like that.
Okay.
You had
All right.
time,
Well,
certainly.
Okay. Well, all right. I'm just wondering. But I guess technically it does tie into a point that I was going to make in response to
Nutty Professor 2 came out in the year 2000, based on the original Nutty Professor in 1996, based on the Jerry Lewis Nutty Professor in 1963.
Okay. Well,
Yes.
I guess the point. My response to that would be that I find that this film is maybe comparable to Gentleman's Agreement in the fact that it is just refreshing to see this narrative, this thematic sort of through line told in a time where those stories, those sort of themes were not present at all.
Sure.
In many ways. So I would say, yeah, for sure that like I brought up a while ago about not casting a Jimmy Stewart or a Gregory Peck or a Cary Grant sort of type in this role. I think is a really interesting step, and it just further drives home this point of like, even if you think that society is telling you that you are not contractually, what word am I looking for here?
Socially
Conventionally attractive or anything like that. There is people out there for you and stuff like that. Contractually. Anyway, God, that threw a fucking monkey wrench in my whole train of thought right there. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll pick up where you left off if you need me to, Tanner. Because I definitely agree, and I find that a large part of the film's success in those measures of telling the story that like I don't expect this story to come out of the 1950s at all. And it's in the casting. Our two leads I think are just like perfectly cast for the roles that they're in. They just they feel good together on screen. I think they have nice chemistry, but also individually, I think they work very well as characters, and I think that they fit into their roles very, very well. We've seen another Ernest Borgnine performance, of course, in From Here to Eternity, which is a similar time scale, but I don't remember him in that movie at all.
Relationships and masculinity and things of that nature. Better movie.
Yeah.
Well, I disagree, but I don't know.
I'm not going to comment.
I honestly don't really remember the themes of masculinity and stuff. I don't remember
boxing.
I remember boxing. I remember Pearl Harbor. Yeah.
So we're gonna have to rewatch it.
No. But I've been light on trivia this episode just because I've been, really just espousing my praises of Marty. But in speaking of the performances, Betsy Blair, who portrays Clara, was almost not permitted by Hecht Lancaster Productions and United Artists due to the fact that she was on the Hollywood blacklist of the 1950s. Yeah, exactly. However, Gene Kelly, her husband at the time, basically blackmailed United Artists and Hecht Lancaster into casting her at the last minute by threatening not to direct or star in any of their films or productions if she was not cast in the role. So, there's a bit of interesting trivia there.
Wow.
Also interesting that she was
Gene Kelly's Kelly,
which is Hollywood royalty right there, I suppose.
Yeah, Gene Kelly, star of Singing in the Rain. They're watching that in Nutty Professor 2: The Clumps.
Are they? Okay.
They do, yeah.
Tucker, if you can make one more connection to Nutty Professor 2: The Clumps, I will give you $1.
I don't need your quarter, buddy.
One shiny quarter.
I'll mail a quarter to you too.
Oh, God.
I'll mail a quarter to you.
How
as
about
well,
bragging rights? We'll give you
you got 50p on
the Quest audience will give you bragging rights that you were able to do.
I feel like I've already earned bragging rights by doing it twice in one Best Picture
No, you gotta do
review.
it one more time. One more time.
Nope.
Okay.
Once more. You need to keep
any other
on your
trivia?
noggin thinking about that. Well, Tanner, do you have any other trivia, or do you have a selection of awards?
Yes,
and
well,
recipients?
I'll do wins and noms because the other trivia I have ties into the wins that it had. So this film won
How
4
pleasant.
Oscars, Best Picture, obviously. Ernest Borgnine won Best Leading Actor. Delbert Mann won Best Director. And Patty Chayefsky won Best Adapted Screenplay. He also wrote the 1953 TV play. So there you go.
Also,
It was
the writer
nominated
for Network, by the way. Tanner.
Interesting. Good writer. Love that movie. Nominations were Joe Mantell for supporting actor. Tucker, can you tell us who Joe Mantell played?
Angie.
Okay, that makes sense. Betsy Blair was nominated for supporting actress. This was nominated for Best Black and White Cinematography and Best Set Direction.
Well,
Or
here's
set
the thing.
decoration. Sorry, set decoration.
The sets did feel very nice.
Set direction. What's it
Set
facing?
decoration.
North?
Well,
Tucker, what's the thing? Tell me the thing.
The thing is,
here's the what's
I think making it stand out even greater in my mind of that I'm not exactly sure why I feel like this movie should have won Best Picture is I think some of those awards are and nominations are deserved, but I wouldn't really say I gel with most of them. Like in any other year, especially in a year like this, there's some much more distinct films that I think absolutely would have deserved a Best Director win. Or even when it comes to the script.
Hit us with some of those.
We're talking about Rebel Without a Cause, Night of the Hunter, Diabolique, Catch a Thief, Pather Panchali, Rafifi, All That Heaven Allows, East of Eden.
Tucker, those are foreign films. We don't nominate those.
Oh, that's a great point. Well, a couple of them are. Just a lot of films that, and not necessarily that I've seen all of those, but ones that I know in the ether have a much stronger visual style, maybe some stronger messaging, things like that I think would deserve more Best Director noms, Best Cinematography noms. And I'm sure some of us got nominations for that. It's just weird to me that this was nominated for things like cinematography and director and won them because those elements of the film, well, I think are fine. Certainly don't cross my mind in terms of wanting them to be the best of the year or things of that nature.
Yeah.
All I would say is that Night of the Hunter is a great movie.
Night of the Hunter is a great movie. But yeah, I guess I'm really on board for Ernest Borgnine, Best Actor there. But obviously, like going up, can you look up if James Dean was nominated for Rebel Without a Cause?
Oh,
because that's a big one to win over if he did win.
Yeah, it's true.
In that competition. But while we are awaiting, unless you have the answer right now,
he was he was nominated for East of Eden, Spencer Tracy for Bad Day at Black Rock, Frank Sinatra in The Man with the Golden Arm, which is a good movie, and James Cagney in Love Me or Leave Me.
Interesting.
So a whole who's who: Spencer Tracy,
James
Frank Sinatra,
Cagney's also of your 50s.
I do find it interesting that Ernest Borgnine being the newcomer to Hollywood, being an underdog in many respects, much like he is in this film. But the other thing that the other big award that this film won was the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival. In many ways, it was the first film to win the Palme d'Or, as previous to that, it was named something else, the top prize of the Cannes Film Festival. But it is Marty is the one of 3 films to win the Palme d'Or and the Academy Award for Best Picture. The other 2 being The Lost Weekend from 1945 and Parasite. So good company there.
Let's go, Billy Wilder.
And yeah, that's about it for trivia here. I believe. I have one more just tertiary bit. I think that one Timo Nelson will enjoy this one.
Found
a Moscow screening of the film during the 1959 Cultural Exchange Program made it the first U.S. feature seen in the USSR since World War II.
Okay, that's actually very interesting.
Thanks, Khrushchev. Wow, that is very cool. I wonder what those Ruskies thought about that when they're like,
they're probably American? Like, I don't understand English.
This film feels very American.
What are they saying? I don't understand this film.
And Heck Lecter or whatever the hell it's called, Productions just didn't subtitle. I would love it if it was called Heck Lecter. That's maybe what I'll name my production company.
Anything else to say, boys?
Any relation to Hannibal?
Of course not. Distantly related.
Let's wrap it up here. Let's wrap it up. Coming off the back of that, let's wrap it up.
What am I going to give this film? I'm going to give this film...
Right. Okay.
I know what I'm giving it. I got a cool number picked out.
I have a cool number,
it's a
too.
cool score. Okay, let's find out what Tanner's cool number. And audience, you tell us in the comments who's got the cooler number in 3, 2, 1. Okay. Pretty big spread. Wow. So the average score is 6.7, which is also the number that I put. Cool. The other numbers go as follow. Tanner gave it an 8. Tucker gave it a 7. I gave it a 6.7. And Abram gave it a 4.9. And so all the averages make it so
you
that
get it. You win.
predicted what the I win.
Yeah.
But there we go. I feel like we got to go
where does it
around
go on the
and do
list?
a round of explanations on this one. Oh, of course. 6.7 is not actually a tie, but it's going to slot it in between My Fair Lady and Ordinary People, right around where Gone with the Wind went, actually, meaning 6.7 is going to be the 55th movie on the list.
Above Ordinary People, below My Fair Lady.
Yep.
That's correct.
Yeah, I mean, I can go first as Mr. Bottom of the Barrel. Yeah, I still think this is a good movie, but I have to remember, at least when I'm approaching a quest score, I'm thinking we're coming up with a relative ranking of best pictures here, and for me, I think this feels like just about an average best picture. There's a lot that I don't like about the film in terms of where I feel like it seems unfocused or it doesn't quite follow through on its ideas, but nonetheless, I think that the nut that is there of that relationship between Marty and Clara is quite compelling, and the couple of really nice scenes we get between them as they spend that night together and segue then into the morning are quite nice. I just wish that there had been some more, especially when, as I was saying, as Tucker was saying, the filmic elements here don't really stand out either. So I kind of feel like it doesn't really stand out, sums up basically my entire thesis on Marty.
Yeah.
Sure.
I guess I should go next because I'm the next lowest, even though I seem to be the hottest on the film while we were talking about it. But it's because I agree with Abram that this is the big quest list. We gotta pull that scale out and use all 10 of our numbers. And so for me, this film I agree that the filmic elements, your filmmaking fundamentals, there's nothing really to write home about here. There's no cool things going on in sound, and the cinematography works, and it allows the acting and the story to come through or whatever. But it does, you can do both, I think. Have nice cinematography and not be annoying with it at the same time. And so I kind of find that this film, it's heartwarming, it's nice, but it doesn't, make me think and really press me to reconsider who I am at a fundamental basis, as some of the films on when we get to the real upper echelons of our list. So that's why it's kind of just a mid low, I guess like a pretty middle score. I guess a high middle score because 5 is middle and 6.7 is above 5.
God.
That's your math.
So
that's your math
reasoning.
lesson for today, folks.
Well, they don't. The audience doesn't come to us for math, so that's good.
They do. Well, they come to us for numbers.
We have the computer to do all of our math for us.
Tucker, go right ahead.
They do.
Yeah. I mean, I guess maybe I could have put this lower in terms of my score, because I think as we discussed this film, I sort of started realizing why I don't think this film will stick with me, even though I do think it is good. It's a really weird Best Picture winner. And reading out those wins and noms, and especially looking at the other films that came out that year and the ones it was up against, I don't think this makes a lot of sense as a winner. I think as a good film from the 50s, absolutely. I recommend people watch it. I think it great performances. It certainly exists in its own bubble because it is willing to tackle topics such as misogyny and the dating culture of the 1950s in ways that other films really weren't. But on the whole, yeah, it doesn't feel particularly special to me, and I think that's unfortunate because I like the movie. I love these characters. I enjoyed my time with the film, but lacking in a special quality is a problem for a Best Picture winning film in my eyes.
Sure. I guess if I were to do some closing thoughts on this,
Yes, we're doing.
Okay, interesting. I would maybe a lot of the things you guys are saying are reminding me of things that people said about Coda immediately after, or leading up to and immediately following its Best Picture win. That it compared to the other films that came out that year, it seemed relatively low speed, sort of low
Innocuous.
stakes, and innocuous. Thank you, Tucker, for that silver dollar word.
See if I'm using that correctly.
Yeah, I think you are.
You are,
For sure
that's
you are.
fine.
Yeah. But innocuous is a good word for it. But I think there is something to some heartwarming films like Coda or like Marty winning the Best Picture award. I guess I don't really put too much stock into the like, oh, this movie didn't do a lot of stuff with its cinematography, or there are some other grander scale films that came out, because I think what the film does have is heart, like Tucker said at the beginning of this episode,
Yeah.
and I think it succeeds in doing that, and it is just really refreshing to see a narrative like this, themes like this happening in 1955, and of course it does lose some points on the face of having these sort of weird tangential plot lines going on that don't really get wrapped up, and we aren't fully out of the weeds and full of like in terms of like 1950s creepiness. Marty does like try to smooch Clara at one point in the house, and the film like kind of has him like half apologize for it, but he also has her like say, "Oh, I wasn't ready for the moment. The moment just came on really fast." So
Yeah, that seems
not
weird.
yeah, not as creepy as scenes like that have been and are in films of this age, but still certainly not. Still certainly has that 1950s creepiness to it. But I think by and large, it is just like I said, it is just really refreshing to see messaging like this coming out of 1955, and it was cool to see the Academy recognize it in that respect.
Well, there you go. Those are our thoughts on Marty.
I
guess.
think
I
so.
guess.
Right?
Yeah, I'm thinking Word Quest.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyone see that cool John Wick 4 picture from today?
No,
I did see that cool John Wick 4 picture from today. Anyway, Timo, pull
Let's
up the
spin
wheel.
that wheel. Let's return the fate.
Well-
The wheel, Tucker. Spin the wheel, Timo.
In that funky wheel, white boy.
I got my finger ready to click the spin
There you go.
button.
I'm visualizing the note that I'm going to hit right there.
Tanner, I'm waiting for you to
I know,
sing,
I'm
man.
visualizing the note. Here we go.
Oh, okay.
Wheel, wheel, what's your deal? Give us a movie that makes us squeal. Is it on digital? Is it on real? Wheel, wheel, what's your deal?
And Wheel's deal is out of 18 possible
that's
options.
Old. That's an oldie right there.
We got option number 15. I think that is an oldie. Will it be a goodie? Tucker,
Today,
tell us
well,
right now.
actually, not today. Well, today we're finding out. But, in the imminent future, we will be watching the 1937 Best Picture winner. And I would give any of you probably $40 if you could actually tell me which film won on your first try in 1937.
4-0.
Starring Paul Mooney and Gail Sondergaard and Joseph Schildkraut. You might believe that some of these people might be German. And directed by William Dieterle. I don't know. Dieterle. I don't know how you pronounce that. We'll be watching The Life of Emile Zola.
Oh, that is an oldie.
The Life
Captain
of Emile
America
Zola.
No, that's Emile. No, that's Emile Blunt. No, Zola. No.
Emil
Wait.
Blonsky and Baron Zemo.
Well, I
is what you're
yeah.
thinking of.
Well, I have watched some movies with Paul Muni in them before, and he's a pretty good actor. He normally did gangster stuff, so we'll see if he plays a gangster in this movie. I guess on the next
plays
episode of
Mil
Quest for
Zola,
the Bestest.
Oh my god! I
It's
think we'll be
yeah,
exploring
he
the
is
the
life
main
of
character?
him,
Okay.
if I'm
Yeah,
not mistaken.
The description of this film, very
Oh, here
short,
we
one
go.
sentence.
Yeah, why not?
A biopic of the famous French writer Emile Zola and his involvement in the Dreyfus affair. He'll
the
hold you in
Dreyfus
silence
affair.
as deep as your
Ooh.
emotions.
How long
The
is
hell
this
is that?
picture,
Dreyfus
Tucker?
affair.
Under 2 hours.
Oh, not very. No, apparently not very long. How
Sure.
long I'll be held in silence for?
Oh,
Well,
Jesus.
an hour 45 is a long time to be silent.
Well, it's
But
an hour
actually, you know what?
56.
You know what? I do it every night. I do it for much longer than every night.
It's a great point.
And the episode.
That's right, Abram.
And the
I
episode,
think,
please.
I think we've gone on long enough. This episode could not be longer than Marty. Let's wrap it up. We'll talk about the life of Emile Zola next time on the Quest for the Bestest. Until then, peace.
Peace, love, and Marty.
Peace,
Marty.
love, and Marty.